This is Carrie from Carrie Barnum Photography. Today I'm going to be discussing curves with you. Curves is a very powerful tool in Photoshop, and much of my editing is done within this adjustment layer. I just love it so much. So let's get started. Here I have an adjustment layer in my layers panel. Let me back up and show you how I got there. In my adjustment panel you will see all these little boxes. Right here, it's a grid or graph, is the curves adjustment layer. Click on that, it pops the curves adjustment layer right in your layer panel. You will see this grid. On this grid, you will find your histogram. You'll find a drop-down menu, RGB, red, green, and blue. These you can go into each color channel and selectively alter the color, but for now we'll leave it on RGB. The top right hand side of this graph is your highlights. It represents your highlights. The center or middle represents your midtones, and the bottom left half represents your shadows. So if you want to make an adjustment to your highlights, lifting those up, maybe you want to bring down the midtones, bring them up, or your shadows. This is what has done to my image. And you can see the change by simply clicking on this eye in the layers palette, or over here there's another eye that you can see. What I love about the layers is that you can lower the opacity. If you don't like the effect, it minimizes the effect on your image. Or you can simply delete it if you don't like it at all. So we'll go back, get another curves layer, and look at this a little more. Another way that I add contrast or check my image to make sure that it's got a nice wide range of colors and tones is this little arrow down here. If I hover over that, on my Mac, I click the Option key, I guess PC would be Alt, and then I click on this arrow. And now you see that my image has gone white. Now if I pull this all the way to the right, everything that you see, now the yellows and the blacks, means that I'm clipping these blacks. So I want to pull back just until I don't see anything. Now in this image, it's all the way to the left. So I've pretty much exposed correctly for the blacks. Now I'm going to go to the right side, which is my whites, and go until I see it start to clip, and I can pull back just a little bit. And this is just a slight little adjustment. It doesn't really do much for this image, but sometimes it really adds nice contrast, nice pop. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of that adjustment now. I'm going to go back, and quite often what I do with my curves layer is just simply don't adjust anything up here on the graph, but come to this drop down menu. And there are three things in this drop down menu that I use quite often. Multiply, which darkens the image, so if you have an overexposed image, this works great to pull it back a bit. And obviously I pull down the opacity quite a bit to get it to where I want it. And you can see how it darkens the image just a bit. Now I'm going to go soft light, which is probably the one I use the most. Adds really nice contrast. And I just lower that until I like like the effect. And then screen, which is right here, is great to use if you have an underexposed image. You can see that it really brightens the image a bit. So this image is exposed nicely, so I wouldn't have to use the screen layer. But so that's another way of using curves. And then the S curve is another way of adding contrast, and I just lift up on the highlights, pull down in the shadows, and that adds some nice contrast. What you can also do with this arrow down here, actually pull up, and this kind of pulls out the shadows a bit and makes it more of a matte feel. So that's another way of utilizing this line. And then finally, this drop-down menu up here, I use this to adjust my white balance or my color tones. If my image is too cool rather, I pull down and make this warmer, or if it's too warm, pull it up and it makes it cooler. If I need to adjust magentas, I select the greens and adjust it through the green palette. So, I mean, obviously this is way too much, but I'm just showing you what you can do with this. And that's about it. Like I said, I love to use curves. I use it in every image I have. I use curves. So play around with